Mastering Money Handling. My name is Leah Mitchell. I am the Interlake Regional Coordinator from Workplace Education Manitoba. This is my first online workshop, so I apologize if I'm making mistakes, but I'm excited to do this, and it should be great. So we will get started here. Mastering Money Handling. We would like to thank the ERSDC and Manitoba Education and Training for support in this project, and also HRDC and Entrepreneurship Training and Trade. We are funded by the government, so without their support, we wouldn't be able to offer these types of workshops to people. Also, I just forgot, welcome to everyone who is attending. We have people from all over Manitoba, so it's very exciting. A couple things here we just wanted to talk about. I know some of you are familiar with Workplace Education Manitoba. We deal with essential skills. So there are 9 essential skills that WEM feels is important for people to have to be successful in the workplace. We are province-wide, and we have WEST centers, which are our drop-in centers that people can attend throughout Manitoba. So if you're not sure of where the local WEST center is for you, please email us, let us know, and we will get you connected with them, because every region has one and they offer a ton of different supports that can help you be successful in the workplace. So as we talk about the 9 essential skills, here's what they are. We've got our reading, document use, numeracy, writing, oral communication, working with others, thinking, digital technology. Obviously, the session that you're in today is going to be a focus on numeracy. This is just a quick outline of what we will be doing today. So today we'll be looking at the basics, the adding, subtracting, multiplying, dividing, rounding, and estimation. And then as you can see in the further workshops, we're going to get a little bit more complicated, the different skills that you need to be successful when you're working with that direct cash, figuring out taxes, figuring out exchange rates. We want everyone to be comfortable doing it with a calculator and doing some of it mentally as well, because that's going to make your skills stronger and help you be more successful. Our last day or two might change a bit because this is our first time running this and we want to cater this to you. So if you have suggestions or ideas or things you want to focus on, please email us, let us know. And there's some pictures of us. So I've introduced myself already, but I'd like to introduce our main instructor, Rochelle, and she's going to join and start us off. Welcome, Rochelle.
Hey, thanks. Good to see everyone. And this other photo here is just a snapshot of a classroom that we have. So the ability to do some more of that learning and being on site with people once, pandemic restrictions lift and we can do things in person. Just want to give you an opportunity to join us in person. But that being said, Leah mentioned many are from all over Manitoba. So let's get technical here and learn how to use our chat feature. So over on the left side of your screen, there's a place for attendee chat. And if you can't see a place to type, then you click on that little arrow that's way over on the left side of your screen so that you can see a place to type. And I'd love you to put in the town that you're in right now. Put that town in there for me so we can see different places we are. And I'm going to start. So there's mine. We've got Selkirk here. We've got Stonewall. We've got Steinbach. Let's hear a few more. Grunthal, Lac de Bonnie. Awesome. Steinbach and Enola. Awesome. Well, that is so cool. So some of you are close, Clandeboy. Some of you are close to where our classroom is. And if you ever get the chance, come and visit us and do some in-person stuff with us. So you already got to see how to use that chat function over on the left side. And at any point during the webinars, you're free to chat in there. You can see that there is an ability to chat so that everyone can see it. So your default setting is that everyone in the group can see the chat. Or if you click on the send to and then the little arrow that's beside it, you'll get an option to privately message the instructors. So Leah and I would have privy to that. We probably would use this one the most. At the top of your screen, there is an option to put in a formal question into another format. We're not going to use that today, so don't worry about that one today. Just stick with your chat on the left-hand side. Now, this is a little bit of an unfair advantage that you have. You get to see us, but we don't get to see you. So the only way we can see you is by how you respond in the chat, and then that little emoji that you have up high. Why don't you go ahead and try out the emoji? I think you can give us a thumbs up. You can select a thumbs down, a happy face, whatever. Right on. You guys are so techie. Look at you techie people. So yeah, those emojis are how we can understand if you're tracking with us. And if you're finding at some point, like maybe a concept's getting stuck a bit, let's use our thumbs down emoji for that. So this is going to mean, hey, wait a sec, re-explain it. I need a little more on that. And otherwise, your thumbs up, your happy face, your mind blown, your applause, whatever, those are the ones that are going to show us how you're reacting and responding to what you've got. Of course, our email address you received already this morning and yesterday. I know there were so many layers of sort of digital paperwork to do. Thank you for doing those. That meant that our funders are able to give us funding to do this class, and it also meant that we have ways to just sort of measure how it's going to work. Like Leah said, this is the first offering of the money math that's happening on a digital platform. So if there's hiccups and road bumps, we're just going to learn together. Want you to know that calculators are welcome here. Give me an emoji if a teacher ever told you not to use a calculator when you were in math class before. I know I was told that, and I was even told one time, you know, you have to memorize this because you're not going to have a calculator carried around with you everywhere, which now, of course, is a huge joke with smartphones because people do have calculators available. So in this class, this isn't all about memorizing. This is about finding the strategies to be able to do the math you need for the job you have. So in that sense, calculators are welcome, and they are common in the workplace. So not only maybe a physical calculator right beside a cash register in case there was any discrepancy or in case the power went out and the cash register failed, but there's often ones on our cell phones and so on. So you would have already received a student workbook yesterday, and if you had access to a printer, I'm glad if you were able to go ahead and print that because you could take notes as we go through. If you're not planning to print that out, that's okay too. I hope you've brought a pen and paper and you can just jot some notes as we go through some things. And of course, at the end of the student workbook, in each session, you'll get fresh links and practice sheets. You'll get websites you can visit to reinforce the concepts that we're covering together. So just lots of really, really valuable resources in that workbook for you. Leah's going to speak to us about why numeracy matters and money math matters and what happens with it and why it's needed in the workplace.
So one of the reasons that this workshop came about is we had a focus group with a bunch of employers in the Interlake, and we asked them, what are some of the skills that you feel your staff are missing? And one of the #1 things they said was working with cash and money math. They said one of the biggest struggles they have is people working with cash registers who don't know how to calculate things without a cash register. You know, if the cash register fails, they don't know what to do. Figuring out how to calculate floats. You know, if someone's coming in and buying a coffee and a donut and the total comes to, you know, $5.25, maybe they accidentally put something in wrong and it comes to $6.50. They're not doing the estimation in their mind to think, hey, that doesn't make sense. So we thought something like this would be really great to start offering so that people can get those skills up, get those strategies, because a lot of people have such a negative experience with math, and it's really not that bad. And like Rochelle was saying, it's not about memorizing everything and not having any help. It's about giving everyone tips and tricks and strategies so that they can be successful, so that you can go into those workplaces and you can be strong and confident in that's math. And even if you're not strong and confident, you've got strategies that will help you be successful.
Well, you know what? Leah's mostly right, but she's a little bit wrong. When you said, hey, math, it's not that bad. For lots of people, at some point, it was that bad. But we're here to change that. It's not going to be that bad. I have a dear colleague who said this phrase recently where she said she's a math phobe. And I just laughed and latched onto that because I thought, isn't that the truth? Any of you been a math phobe out there before? Even about one concept. I'm not saying you have to hate math, but just have you had a concept or two where you're just like, ugh, dread? Well, here's the thing. It's a real thing. There's actually a thing called math anxiety. It's a condition that affects half of the population. This is not nothing. So things happen where you are put on the spot, you need to know an answer mathematically, and you freeze and your body reacts and you go into this panic or anxious mode. And it's a real thing that affects half of us. And I just thought, you know, we have to touch on this and address the idea that at some point, at least half of us taking this class today, odds are, have had a moment where the anxiety hit us or fear hit us. And it's actually a real thing where your brain starts firing with different areas, different cylinders effectively. You know, if you're in a realm where you're feeling anxious about the numeracy in front of you, maybe you're right in front of the customer, you have to calculate something in your mind instead of using the cash register. If you feel anxiety about that, you're using a certain part of your brain that only is used when you feel the anxiety. If you don't feel the anxiety about it, you're actually using two other parts of your brain that are firing and able to do the numeracy with ease. So it's a real thing that actually you do get impacted by anxiety. And the key to overcoming that has to do with privacy. The key is practicing and doing things when you're not put on the spot, when you don't have the pressure, when you don't have the fear and the anxiety because there's a looming deadline that you're supposed to know this answer in 10 seconds, or you're supposed to know this answer in front of 20 people. So I just want to free you. If you're one of the 50% who could say, hey, I've been a math phobe at some point, I just want to free you and release you from that and tell you that as you practice with us over the next few weeks, we're going to give you apps to use, websites to visit, where you get to practice those privately in the safety of your home or in the safety of on your cell phone, and no one's breathing down your neck to get the answer right. When you go and do that practice time for 10 minutes a day, 20 minutes a day, whatever you can carve out, you're going to find that by the end of the 4 weeks, that math phobeness, the math anxiety, and those emotional reactions that happen, they start to calm as those tips and tricks start to rise and you reach for those first instead of the fear first. So I'm sorry, I just need to apologize right now. You're going to hear us say over and over that you've got to practice and you got to practice every day, but they're really actually the key in setting you free from being part of that 50%. Leah, the basics.
So, and just to, I'm going to say it to reinforce what Rochelle said. My background is I used to teach high school math, and knowing those basics affects everything you can do in the future. Having that adding, subtracting, multiplying, dividing, being comfortable with how to do them by hand, and how to do them on a calculator is very important, because then you can do it quicker, then you can do it faster. I'm going to try the little emojis thing. So everyone, give me a happy face or a sad face. Who knows their multiplication tables up to 12 by 12? If I said to you, what's 12 by 12? Could you tell me? Give me a happy or sad or a thumbs up. Good. So we got some people saying yes. Good. So that's good. I think a lot of, my generation, and I know a lot of other generations, I remember standing in rows and my teacher just giving me flashcards. They don't do that anymore, because I've got kids in school, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, but I do think it's important for people to have those things memorized so they can come to you easily, to practice using your mind. So, because when you're at that cash register, if that stops working, you've got to be able to do some of those calculations faster. So what I have on here, if you look in your workbook on page 4 and 5, or sorry, page 5, I actually have a list of apps and suggestions. We talk about we want you to work on these skills 10 to 20 minutes a day. I've got some apps on here that I would suggest that I use with my kids. I've got a child in grade 3, grade 6, and then the younger one. And some of them are free, some of them aren't. If you go into the app store and just type them in, it'll tell you. There's nothing more than about, I think $2 or $3 was the most I spent. But there's free ones as well. And if you don't want to use the apps, all you have to do is type in the computer adding games, subtraction games, multiplication games. There's tons of free games even on the computer. And if you don't want to do any games, you can even just type in adding worksheets, subtraction worksheets, free, and type in free with it. You'll get free ones. And just sit there with your calculator and do them. You don't even necessarily have to start off doing these things, memorizing. It might be a matter of just looking at it and using your calculator and typing out the answers. Because even just doing that consistently for 10 minutes a day, you're going to constantly see those answers. You're going to start to remember them more and more. It's really just about practice and starting out with what is comfortable for you. And like I said, you might not appreciate it now, but in a month, if you've been doing this every day, you'll definitely notice a difference, and you're definitely going to be stronger when you're at work and you're using these skills, and you can do those calculations in your head a lot more comfortably, or even just faster on the calculator. So definitely use the resources, try out some of the apps, and like we said before, at the back of the booklet, there's tons of videos and games that you can try as well. Some of the YouTube videos are great, just tips and tricks on how to be faster as well. So definitely check out those things. Make an investment for the next month.
I love the free investment. That's awesome. Hey, we had to talk about rounding. Do you love rounding? Let me see those emojis. I'm so excited. I like rounding. It's always nice when it rounds up. Someone owes you money and they automatically round it up. I have a great sister, and the cool thing about my sister is we're often somehow exchanging money. Like yesterday was Mother's Day, for example. So we bought my mom a group gift. So she paid for it and picked up some takeout, and so I owed her money for it. And so we're often rounding, where it's like, well, maybe she paid $19.22 for the takeout. Well, I just give her 20 bucks. That's rounding. And it actually comes into play with cashiers and servers, because the way money has changed means we have to round all the time. Now that there's no pennies, we literally have to round for every cash transaction that we do. So it's just a key skill that is really going to set you free in handling money and being able to make change for people. And rounding to the fives, rounding to the nearest 5, rounding to the nearest 10, or being able to round to the nearest 100, those are sort of the benchmark ones that you want to grasp those, because you're going to find that those come up over and over as you're dealing with numbers. So even rounding to hundreds, you sort of have this intuitive sense where you know that if someone's saying that something's $155, you sort of can measure that in your head, where you're like, well, that feels like it's going to be a little bit closer to 200 once we add the tax to that. So I think you intuitively round all the time. But the rounding to fives is one that we really haven't had to do much in real life, but now we have to do with cash. So we're going to focus a little bit on the rounding to fives as we meet together today. There's a lot of rounding games out there, and we do have those listed in your student handbook. Funbrain.com is one of the websites that we're directing you to. And don't be scared if it looks a little bit kid-like. Like, that's just how computer games look. So don't be intimidated if it seems like, oh, it looks a little cheesy or whatever. On funbrain.com, you get to choose the type of math that you want to learn. So there are rounding games, there's estimation games, there's multiplication games. So I just want to point you to there, because I want you to test yourself and see, am I really as good at rounding as I hoped I was? And let me practice with different levels of numbers. Let me practice rounding to the nearest 10. Let me practice rounding to the nearest 100, and so on. Well, like the example with money that I owed my sister just yesterday, really rounding is about taking a number and making it a more simple number so that when you're adding it or subtracting it, it's an easier number to work with. So in our example here today, we see the number 73, and we want to round that to the nearest tens. So should 73 be closer to 70, or would it be closer to 80? Well, because 3 is a lower number and closer to 70 on a number scale, we would just round that to 70. And you're actually going to see this come up in a couple more slides about what we think the hardest math is on the market. You're going to see the 70 and the 80 come up again. And here we see an example of the number 76. Where do we round that to? Should it be rounded to 70 or should it be rounded to 80? Well, it starts to make a little bit more clarity when we see numbers on a number scale. So let's take it out of thinking of rounding to the nearest 10, and let's imagine that we're rounding to the nearest 5. Of course, like I say, this impacts us because rounding out with change means we can no longer give 6 cents back to a customer. We have to give them 5 cents instead because pennies have become obsolete. Incidentally, that's not just in Canada, that's in a number of nations where pennies have become obsolete. And so this is a skill that you're going to find even as a consumer. If you were to travel to, say, New Zealand or a couple of the European countries, you're going to find this, that the rounding happens at the point of sale all over the world. So we need to think of pennies no more and think that we can either give someone a 0 ending, we can give them a 5-cent ending, or a 10-cent ending when it comes to the little bit of change that we have. So when we're thinking about a dollar, we were probably taught in school, and you could give me a thumbs up emoji if you're maybe older than, say, 15 years old. You were probably taught that $1 is equivalent to 100 pennies. And that's true. That's actually the value of it. There is a value that it's equivalent to 100 pennies. But you probably were not taught to think of it in increments of 5s because we didn't know that the penny would become obsolete. And so now instead of doing exact equations, we're just constantly rounding to the 5. So let's imagine we've actually sold someone a coffee and a bagel, and then we've come up with a subtotal amount of $4 and we've added on taxes to that so that the customer's total becomes $4.52. Well, as we see on the lower part of the slide, if they're going to pay debit, credit, or by check, we just keep it the exact amount because digital currency can calculate pennies. So if they're paying by debit, we can still charge them $4.52. But if they wanted to pay with cash, we have to round that 2 out of there and get it to a place where the digit in the same column that the 2 is in is either a 0 or a 5 or a 0 representing the 10 cent. So we're going to round that one down to $4.50. And this is where that private practice comes into play, because when you're on the spot and the customer hands you the cash, you don't want to have the math anxiety that hangs you up. You want to practice this so that the rounding of the 5 cents gets comfortable for you. So if we really look at splitting up the number line into 2 segments, we know that when we're dealing with a smaller number, numbers under 5, we're going to be rounding to either the 0 or the 5. Now notice that dotted line right in the middle. That's representing the halfway mark in between 0 and 5. So there's a simple visual to see that if we're on the left side of that line, we're going to round our number to the 0. If we're on the right side of that line, we're going to round it to 5. Now this is going to make sense to all of you in different ways. So some of you will be able to see the visual of the number line, and you see it in a linear way, and you know which way you're supposed to move to round. Others of you don't see it in a linear way. In fact, I was talking to my husband about rounding, and interestingly enough, I think he might be the only person in the universe who sees it this way, but he doesn't see rounding in a left to right kind of way. He pictures a number line going up and down, and he knows his rounding up and rounding down in that way. And so in his case, he memorizes whether it's going up or down based on the number. So if you don't see it in a visual horizontal way, I want you to just look to the left and make yourself a note. If If my number ends with a 2 or down, I round down, 3 and up, round up. That little rhyme or that principle also works on the other side of the number line. So when I'm dealing with numbers that are between the 5 and the 10, let's say 6 cents or 9 cents, I need to apply the rounding rules with those too. And I can see where my middle is. So I know that if I have a 6 or a 7, I have to round down to the 5 because those numbers are closer to 5 than they are to 10. And I can see that if I have an 8, let's say, something ends with 8 cents, like 38 cents, I know I have to round that up to the 10 and give them actually 40 cents because the 8 is closer to the 10 than it is to the 5. So there again, if you don't see it in a visual linear way of left to right, if you don't picture it that way, because that's not the way you're wired, then you just want to write down that rule and know 7 and down, round down, 8 and up, round up. And then you have those tools in your toolkit when you're working with the money. So we're going to practice a few together, okay? And you're going to chat. You're going to give me some feedback in that chat room over on the side. And we're looking at a couple of price points. So the first one gives us an example. If something totals $6.99 and you need to round it so that you don't have to deal with pennies, but you're rounding to the nearest nickel, would that go up or down? And we get the answer in front of us for the first one. So that's pretty awesome. We're going to round that up to $7. Now the next one. If we're dealing with $14.82, let's say that's the change that's due to the customer and we need to give them change. What are we going to give them? Can anyone tell me first, not the numerical answer, but are we going to round that up or round down? Just type in up or down and let me know what you think. I see a couple downs popping up, and maybe if you think that you know where that's going to go to, maybe you can even pop the new price in there in the chat. That's going to be $14 and what cents? $14 and how much cents? So exactly, the rounding down gets us to $14.80. And when we look at our next number, let's get a sense. If we're dealing with 24 cents, are we going to go up and round it up, or are we going to go down and round it down? So we have the ability to give them $76.20 or $76.25. That one we can take up and make it an even quarter. 937, we get the same kind of thing, but sevens are the tricky ones. So I want you to pay attention to yourself. If you find that you're thinking for a moment, which number is 7 closer to? 7's actually a tricky one. So maybe you want to write down that little rule about which way you should be rounding. 7 and down is the round down. Often people mistake 7 and take that one up because it's a higher number when you're measuring in other ways. But when it comes to the nickels, that one actually goes down to 9.35. So we might think, hey, who even uses cash anymore? How much rounding do we really have to do? Well, I want you to think about it in this sense, that technically most of the transactions that happen, the majority happen with credit or debit cards. So 75% of those transactions, you won't even need to round. But 25% of them, you will need to round. So imagine your workday. If you're on shift as a cashier or a server, or if you're out on the golf course and you're the one working the beverage cart, whatever it is, 1/4 of your entire shift is going to be dealing with cash. So the rounding actually does go into play when you start counting how many customers you're going to deal with in a day. And notice the little bubble at the bottom of this slide. That number actually spikes and you deal with way more than 25% of your customers handling cash if you're dealing with small amounts. So maybe if you're selling coffee, let's say, or something to that effect, your cash transaction numbers go up significantly higher. So paying attention to your rounding skills to the nearest nickel is actually going to give you a freedom for at least 1/4 of the time that you're dealing with customers. The other thing about rounding and why it's so great to practice rounding is because it makes you really, really good at estimating. And estimating is like a huge life skill that I bet you don't even realize how much you use that skill, but you use it probably almost every day. We do estimating whether we're the customer or the worker or someone being questioned for details. We find that estimation comes up as a consumer often. Maybe I've gone to the grocery store with a $20 bill and I want to buy milk and bread and eggs and maybe some fruit if there's money left over. So in my mind, I'm constantly estimating how much is this adding up to, and I'm giving a little bit of buffer room to accommodate taxes. As an employee, I'm estimating all the time. Maybe I'm the one changing the tire on the vehicle, and it took me 10 minutes to change a tire. When my supervisor comes and asks me, how much longer is it going to take on this vehicle? I could estimate and say, it'll take me 30 more minutes because I have 3 more tires at 10 minutes each, or whatever I estimate that they should take me. And then, of course, in loss prevention, if you've ever been in a fast-paced environment where theft is part of the retail environment, you can show me an emoji if you know you've ever had to answer questions about theft and so on in the workplace. This comes into play all the time. You have to estimate how much you think the people had. You had to estimate how tall they are, and that kind of estimation happens. You know, I know my height, I'm 5'7", so I know if I looked up a little bit, that person was probably about 6 feet tall, and then I can answer that the thief was probably about 6 feet tall. So it's interesting how estimation comes up over and over in the service industry. And estimation is really just picking a number that's close enough, because you're not doing an exact calculation, you're not looking for a precise formula, you're looking for something that gives a rough picture to how much something is, or a rough estimate of the closest number. Now, when we are good at estimating, we actually can save money because we know whether we're getting ripped off at the till or not, right? So if I knew I wanted to buy 5 magazines, they all were about $2 each, but a little bit lower than 2. And then the cashier told me that I owed them 12 something. In my mind, I would think, well, no, my total's really only supposed to be about 10 bucks. That doesn't seem right. So then I could ask to verify the total. Have you ever done this, like verify the total because you know you've estimated already what your purchase amount was supposed to be? Great, great skill to have, because in a pressure situation or when the person at the service counter is zoned out, they're not estimating. They don't know they've overcharged you. Of course, it saves time and creates efficiency in the workplace because of that whole production, manufacturing, getting things done. When you can estimate effectively, you can actually budget for a project. You know how long something should take or how many people it takes and so on. And of course, it's like your safeguard when you're using a calculator. And this is the one I kind of want to emphasize because a lot of your skills over the next few weeks are going to encourage you to use a calculator. While practicing estimating with some of those games online or whatnot and just challenging your own estimating skills, it's like you get to be the proofreader for using a calculator. So if I knew that I needed to take 107 and times it by 56, I probably wouldn't do that using mental math. Now, Leah would, right, Leah? I know you would. I probably wouldn't do that with mental math. I would use a calculator to come up with that answer. And the answer might tell me that it's 952. Well, if I was estimating as I went along, I would say, well, 107 times 56 is kind of like timesing 100 by 50. You know, I just round those numbers and create an estimation. And so quickly off the top of my head, all those zeros, I think my answer should be about 5,000. And so by knowing how to estimate and round numbers out, I know then when I get an answer of 900, I can say, wait a sec, I did something wrong in my calculation. And so the rounding and the estimating also helps you before that moment when you tell the customer how much they owe. If you're a server in a bar and you knew that they bought 3 beers, and then you go to take them their bill and it tells you that they owe you $200, well, you've already estimated that their bill should be about 15. So you save yourself an embarrassing moment before you hand them the actual bill. This is the hardest math in the universe. Have you been in the toilet paper aisle? Now, right now, in pandemic, I guess this math doesn't exist because maybe there's no toilet paper to buy. But can I get an amen if you have been in the toilet paper aisle and 3 out of 12 brands are on sale and you are trying to figure out what the best deal is? Truly, toilet paper math is the hardest kind of math. My goodness. And then they got the whole double roll, single roll. Our sheets are this size. We're double ply, blah, blah, blah. Hey, my friends, this is where rounding and estimation is your BFF. Because instead of me looking at all of these overwhelming packages and trying to figure out what the heck, which package has enough rolls of them. And yes, Francis, these toilet paper people, they lie like a sidewalk. These toilet paper people lie and tell you that you get the best value. Even some of them that say double roll, sorry, bunny trail, I'm frustrated with toilet paper math, but look at my image here. If I just quickly at a glance looked at a couple of the ones that were on sale, if I just wanted to round them and do some rounding and estimating, I'd say, you know what, this pack's about 50 rolls, this one's about 70, and so on. And then I would just compare the prices. How much for a roll of toilet paper? And I would just divide that into the amount that they're asking me for. So again, this is just sort of a real life example showing how those rounding and estimation skills come into play over and over in the workplace. And I've been guilty of this as a customer. Like, I do work in a retail environment outside of what we're doing here today. I also have a retail environment that I work in. And so often I see customers do what I've been guilty of doing as a customer, where they just ask, so, you know, I don't want you to scan this. I don't have time to wait. Just tell me about how much this is or about how much this discount would be. And so being strong in these skills is just going to set you up for success in whatever point of sale that you find yourself working in. Now, this website, Mathisfuncom, is kind of cool because I think Leah named it because it's called Mathisfun. I'm totally picking on Leah because she's the real high school math teacher, high level math teacher. And sorry, Leah, you'll have to give me a thumbs down emoji. But this actually really is a cool website. And I just want you to note it. It is in your workbook. It's something that is for free. And you can go on here and they'll give you not only the explanation of rounding and estimation, you can just take your time to go through that and grasp it in the ways that make sense to you. However, you can also do different games and ways to practice and worksheets. Now, one of the games that we really like and we want you to use, and it's free, it won't cost you anything, you just do it online and you don't have to buy a membership or anything like that, is one called Changemaker. And the cool thing about Changemaker is if you will handle cash at all in your job, Changemaker is going to help strengthen you, guaranteed. However, even if you don't handle cash a lot in your job, Changemaker is what helps you practice your adding, your subtracting, and your rounding. Because as you work with making change and counting back change for people, you're automatically using those skills over and over and over. It looks like this when you go inside of it, and it's going to tell you how much a sale costs. So maybe the amount of sale is what is due. That's how much someone's total is they owe you 90 cents. And then the amount that they paid is $5. And you have to figure out, what would I give them in what denominations? So would I give them a toonie back plus 25 nickels? You decide the type of change that you want to give back to them. And then, of course, it tells you whether that's right or not, and it all goes into your piggy bank to add up how you're doing on making change. Now, you might be really good at making change, and you might be not so strong in that. Whatever category you're in, we do want you to try this week. So this is part of your homework, is to try this website, because this brings up those fundamental skills of the adding, the subtracting, and the rounding just intuitively. And as you can see on the screen, they've eliminated the penny. So you're forced to round to the nearest 5. Now, big disclaimer, like, who's ever pushed on a button on a web page you've been recommended to, and then you're lost in like Crazyville, and you've got pop-ups and ads, and you just don't even know what's happening? I want to tell you that that has the potential to happen to you in FunBrain. And so the very place that we're sending you can be a little overwhelming. And this is usually the case of a free website, right? The whole reason it's free is because there's advertisers who are paying the bills for that, the place to offer it for free. So in this case, you can see my blue circles on the screen. It shows that I have a whole section circled about grades, and then I have a whole section circled on the bottom where they're all written in red. And my blue arrows point you to a couple fine details. The blue arrow on the top shows a little faint word called advertisement. It's almost hard to even see on the screen. And my blue arrow to the right side shows a little X that you could click on. And that X often will close out the ad or close out the pop-up. Sometimes you can't see them. Sometimes you have to hover your mouse until you can find the X to close it out. But I just want to say my ads that are showing on the screen for you today are because of the type of content I had been looking at in my own web surfing for other things. Your ads will look entirely different. It might be click here to buy a car or whatever. So we just want to say, beware of the ads. Don't click on those. That's why we're showing you the picture of the piggy bank, and so on. That's the place you want to click, so you're not taken off in all of these bunny trails of really, really bad pop-ups and different kinds of ads. I want to give you a huge pat on the back today because, as Benjamin Franklin said, investing in your own knowledge is what pays the best interest. And there's no one measuring you here today, right? You're not going to get a report card for how today's session went. And probably no one forced you to be here today either. So for you to be able to take time out and carve out to invest into yourself so that you beef up your math skills, you're doing something that often other people can't even see. There's just change happening on the inside of you. And so I just want to pat you on the back. Thank you for signing up, and thank you for going through this program with us, because you're just going to have such a boost to your own sense of accomplishment and sense of courage in the things that you can do with math.
Just to go over, just a second here, I went too fast. So some things just to refresh. We want you to practice working on your change with Changemaker. Work on some adding, subtracting, multiplying, dividing. If you were going to pick one thing to do, well, I'll say 3 things. Focus on the adding, subtracting, and multiplying. Dividing, I mean, honestly, most of us do most of our dividing with a calculator, so don't stress about too much on that one, but it's that adding, subtracting, and multiplying. If you can work on those. We're going to be doing some practice with change next week, so you can see on the slideshow there, and it's also in your workbook. If you can sort of get that change together. Now, we're not going to be checking if you have that change. You can literally go get a piece of paper and just cut out things that say, toonie, loony. So it doesn't have to be real money. We just are going to be practicing hands-on working with change next week. Also, another thing, if you have kids or family, practice with them. These skills are important for everyone. Like I said, from being a math teacher, you can tell who knows their times tables and who doesn't, because it shows in math as they get older. So all of these things can be done with your kids as well to get them to increase their skills. And it's all fun games, and it'll keep them entertained since we're all homeschooling anyway. And if you have any questions, please type them in the chat area. We'll stay on for a few minutes here. If anyone has anything they want to ask, if you're not comfortable, please email us. My email is in the book. But we hope you enjoyed today and you're getting ready for some more math next week.
And I want to give you the answer to a question that we're going to ask next week. So who wants a free answer to a question? Don't you love free answers, right? When we gather this time next week, we are going to ask you and say, tell us which app you used or which website you visited. And Changemaker won't count. Changemaker is one we're forcing you to do. You got to do that one. That's just, we all have to do it. I'm going to do it. I'll give you my personal commitment. I'm going to go on Changemaker this week too and practice. But in addition to Changemaker, we're going to ask you, where did you go? What did you try out? Did you try out subtracting? Did you try out dividing? What website did you use? And maybe it won't even be one of ours. Maybe you'll find a new one, but we're just giving you a heads up. You will be asked that question. You will be invited to share. So have an answer for that one.
I think it doesn't look like we have any questions for right now. That's okay. Like I said, email us if you have any questions. But I think we're good. Hope everyone has a wonderful day. It looks pretty nice here right now. A little cold, but enjoy the day.
Yes, thanks everyone for joining in. Your link to get into today's class will stay the same for all 4 sessions. We will plan to email you again next week. However, I just want you to know, if you just want to tuck away the email that you got this morning inviting you into this class, that's going to be the same link to click on next week too. So we'll see you next Tuesday. Have a great week. Bye everyone.